got some great panels. We're talking about the sunset stage, what's happening locally and regionally. We will also have things that are applied on a national basis. The first panel is here, Mary Shanklin. She's now an independent journalist. She's also a teacher at Central Florida University in Orlando. And full disclosure, she also has a publishing company and Fifth State Media and she published my book. So she's special. But full disclosure. Rebecca St. James, she's with the Miami Herald. She just started something new. We're going to talk about that in a second. And then Alex Harris, really competent reporter here in the city. And she's now working on climate change, and which is huge. Not for this area, but for any place with frontage on the coast. So, just want to real quickly, short version. What's the big stories that are happening around? And another disclosure, we got a lot of stuff today and during this conference about the condo collapse. So we're going to leave those panels to cover that topic. Mary, what's some of the big stories you think are available right now?
Well, I'd say in Florida, like so many markets across the country, we see the big ramp up in prices. We were talking about, I don't know how appraisers are really hitting the mark when, the values go up so much in a month. Everybody is, when is it going to top out? And, that's hard to say because it's not leveraged up on bad debt the way that it was, the 2006 crash. So one of the things that's happened in the cycle, Florida really overbuilt on golf courses, and that was just it was just a marketing strategy to sell lots, in addition to offering an amenity. But now what we're seeing more are that some of kind of the outlier developers are going to a completely different model, agri-hoods. I think that you may have seen a few of these around the country. We're seeing more and more of them in Florida. It used to be that you would do like a raised bed in a community, and then you would call that, we've got this community garden. This is completely different. It's where you've hired a farmer, you've dedicated serious acreage that's actually dry and not wetlands. You're sending your produce to maybe the homeless coalition. You're actually staging a farmer's market. You're like getting volunteers from the community in to operate these, and then you're doing you're threading gardens throughout the community in the design of it. Not quite like the golf courses, but I would say what we're seeing is that's kind of at its genesis right now, and kind of taking over where the golf courses have been.
That's right. And today, by the way, footnote, we're going to talk about some of these issues on the agri-hood thing. We have a major designer of agri-hoods, land planner on the post-COVID suburb, which happens today. Okay.
So for us,
yeah, tell us. I'm interested, Rebecca, in what you're doing with your newly unveiled publication.
the newsletter.
Yes.
So we launched the newsletter in 2019. I joined the Miami Herald to help launch this. At first it was a daily newsletter, and now it's become a weekly newsletter. The purpose of it, and it still remains the purpose, it's still the same, to help compile a list, provide a guide for our readers to tell them, here are all of the real estate stories that we have for you. Because what we found was that we had a lot of readers telling us, I want to read more about real estate, but I don't know where the real estate coverage is. Although we have our own section that you can find online and in the publication. And so with this real estate newsletter, what we try to do is every week I incorporate my own stories, my own reporting, but also I read often, I read every day the work of my colleagues, and so I include their work in our newsletter. So that might include the City of Miami reporter Joey Fletches, Miami-Dade County reporter Douglas Hanks, and we include their work so to inform our readers what's going on, what's happening in the real estate market here.
And she's kind of new to the real estate beat, and so we're glad to have you here. We want you to be a NAREE member for life. All right, Alex, tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, so I think you started out by asking what's the most important thing going on in your beat, and I have a bias, and that's climate change. That's the full-time beat I cover for the Miami Herald. So I write about real estate from that lens. So Rebecca and I work together on real estate stories. I'm very interested in tracking how a desire for elevation or floodproofing is driving the market. I've written about a bunch of studies about a phenomena that some people have called climate gentrification, which is the drive for more higher elevation properties, usually inland a little bit, and how that is displacing people in usually historically Black or Hispanic neighborhoods in Miami specifically. And I also write about how as flood risk grows, we don't really have the right way to account for it. FEMA flood maps, bad, terrible way of measuring risk. And there are all these new products and techniques and real estate people who are specializing in this and want to talk, okay, this is the best way to analyze risk. And therefore you should calculate the value of your product based on my assessment. But there's no universal standard. So that sort of leaves the market a little bit of flux, and you'll have some more educated buyers, whether it's commercial or sometimes residential, who are savvy of this and are like, okay, I don't want to spend $6 million on a home right on the water. Maybe I'd rather something still just as luxe, but a little inland where I don't have to worry about crazy expensive flood insurance, wind insurance, all the other costs that come along with the reality of the city we live in is experiencing flooding and higher temperatures and hurricanes at a higher and stronger rate than we ever have before. So it's very interesting to watch, as the research is sort of ahead of what the market believes right now. And so a lot of our work is sort of focusing on that gap. So we spend a lot of time on that.
Sandy, do we have the slide for this program? Harvest and this brings me to my next topic. When we're finding who are the best reporters around that we can invite to be on this panel, we have a great local representation in the local media. So we've got two great ones here. And then there was another one, there was another byline that I didn't recognize. And I emailed him, I called him, he walked over to the Miami Herald and knocked on the door. And in fact, well, no. So we found one. Doesn't have a college degree, didn't have a high school degree, didn't even go to elementary school. You can see the byline, it's kind of small, but the Miami Herald bot wrote this story, a real estate story, that appeared in the Miami Herald. And I go, what happened here? We just want to ask about that. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but let me just tell you this, that we're NAREE, we're the real estate editors. This was formed in 1929 by guys that wrote for real estate and wrote about real estate for various papers around the country. And I want to have, my personal opinion is, we need to have people writing stories. We don't need to have bots writing stories. We don't want to have, okay, what is this? This is the 17,000 square foot building, changed hands or something. But, where's the reporter that's going to be there and said, oh, the old guy has been there since 1980. I remember that. Didn't wasn't Trump's son used to own the building? Or was that Eric Clapton? It's like they remember, they had the institutional memory. You don't get that with a bot. And you don't, and the other thing, which I'm really conscious of, is, I like people that have jobs. I don't like to see people lose their jobs. And there are guys that There's one guy I really know, and he's pretty far over 70, but all he's done his whole life is been a newspaper guy. And now he lives on Social Security. His wife is sick. They don't have a lot of dough. But if you said, hey, you want to write stories like that, I know the guy that really needs the job, so he can support his wife and pay his bills. Anyway, talk to me about that, Rebecca.
So McClatchy expanded a technology that it had implemented in other newsrooms. And this bot joined us in October. And it produces daily stories, maybe 2, 3, 4 stories a day that highlight the top residential sales. Any residential sale, whether it's a condo or single family home. It also compiles lists of the top, the highest residential sales in Miami-Dade County and in Broward. And there have been concerns on both sides. On one hand, we see I've had conversations about the potential about this, regarding this technology. It could, in one sense, automatically produce daily stories about the highest sales per square foot, or the highest sale for a community. When it comes to a single family home, we are seeing multi-million-dollar transactions. So on one hand, I have had conversations about, well, if we can just modify this technology where it sort of, it identifies these sort of transactions, it can say, okay, this is the highest based on these other numbers that we have, instead of just reporting one sale after another sale. On the other hand, if you read these stories, they lack a lot of substance. These stories don't have the same context that our editors expect of us reporters, including who bought the house, who sold the house, why were they interested in buying and selling, what does this say about the community that we're seeing such a high level, either volume of transactions or high, pricey transactions. The quality is not the same, and as I mentioned before, since it reports on any sale, if I were to go to my editor and say, I'm thinking about reporting on this, $600,000 sale in Coral Gables, my editor would ask, well, why? What's the news value here for our reader? So this bot lacks that. And so we have the concern in the newsroom, what are our subscribers paying for? How can we ensure that they gain quality news? And so it is still in test mode. As I said, the newsroom incorporated this into its news flow in October, and it's still being tested. So we'll see what ends up happening with the bond.
Interesting. Well, the executive editor of the Miami Herald will be here tomorrow, so I hope somebody asks her about that. I think this is wrong. I'm sorry. I know what they're doing. They're trying to do it. But Mary, what do you think?
Well, I appreciate you raising this, and I think it is a serious question, and I think in the world where there is an abundance of news, that what we bring to the table is like a curation, and we're selecting actually newsworthy topics, and we're doing what a bot can't do, which is we all have bullshit detectors, and we can all ask the questions of where did the money come from for that sale, and really the things that as you say, it's the context that's everything. That's what I teach to my students first and foremost. At my alma mater at the Orlando Sentinel, they unionized earlier this year, the reporters did, as trying really a preemptive strike against the Alden Capital Group, a hedge fund buying the Tribune Company. That was, Sentinel was one of about 10 different newspapers that were owned by the Tribune Company. And so the union formed in hopes of finding kind of a deep pocket white knight to come in and run it the way, like, I don't know if you're familiar in Texas with like the Texas Tribune, you know, the model where, you know, they've got like 3 really great sources of revenue. You know, it's kind of nonprofit funding, donors, sponsors, memberships. And so the newly formed union group, they weren't successful in finding this. They were taken over by the Alton group, and as Alex had mentioned before we went on, like the day that they came into town, you know, there were the letters that went out. You know, it was like a blank for your name. You know, oh, here's your buyout. You know, here's, you know, we'd like you to leave now. And, you know, it's the fear is that if you don't take the buyout now, you know, well, it's going to be just a small fraction of what it might be if you wait till the next one. And, you know, if at the end of the day, you know, you are replaced with bots or vastly inexperienced, you know, journalists or, you know, people without degrees. You know, at the end of the day, it's the readers, and in my opinion, it's society that is going to pay the price for that.
It's also, if I can jump in here, it's also the product, because we constantly hear concerns about, well, you're raising subscriptions, and our readers were trying to update our webpage and access on the app, and so imagine if the quality of the news suffers. Readers are going to highlight that. They're going to say the product that we're paying for is not the same. Let me go to another. You risk losing that reader, that subscriber, to another publication, to your competitor.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that exactly what Rebecca just said is one of the biggest things that we're worried about in modern journalism right now, which is that we do have shrinking resources because we have less readers, and it's a vicious cycle, whereas the resources shrink, fewer people want to read the product that you're selling, and the only way to not lay off everyone in your entire news outlet is to keep raising the rates. And you just get stuck in trying to find creative ways to go around that, which the bot was one of the experiments where they launched, which is, we have no idea how much the bot cost. So you can't even necessarily say it's cheaper than a reporter. But they're very well-read stories, and they bring in a lot of programmatic advertising. But they also do a lot of other experiments. Sometimes work about it. The Climate Change Beat was an experiment for us to see if that, because readers had been asking us for it. So we built it in addition to the Environment Beat, and it has been successful. And Rebecca's real estate newsletter has been really successful as well. We have a full-time real estate reporter, and in addition, we have Rebecca with this newsletter, which was fully supported for the first 2 years of advertising when they first hired her. So real estate reporting, as any of you, if you're any business reporters in this room, which I assume most of you are, business is one of the last bastions where there's good advertising, lots of things to write about, and something that there's continued interest in almost every community. So I think organizations like yours and the topic you guys cover is something that will probably be one of the longest lasting beats that any local regional outlet you find.
Mary mentioned the fact that, you know, there is was organized labor happening in the newsroom at the Orlando Sentinel, and that stuff you're talking about, the Austin Statesman, American Statesman, and other places. And I've even, you know, heard scuttlebutt that this could be happening at the Miami Herald. Is that true?
Yeah, so the Miami Herald almost 2 years ago voted to unionize, and it was an overwhelming majority, so it's one Herald Guild combining the Miami Herald and El Nuevo Herald, our sister Spanish language publication. And we are in the midst of arguing for our very first contract. There is some hope that we can get that buttoned up in the next 6 months, and that lasts for 3 years. And it comes with all of the hairy details from reporting. You argue about outsourcing, you argue about raises, you argue about wage equity, overtime, COVID safety. You voted to unionize right before COVID, so a lot of the precautions have been stuff that, you know, it does not just come from management, and that is the word of God. Everyone has to follow them. We get to argue back and advocate for ourselves and unionize, which is, it has been an interesting process. I think most of us in the newsroom is the first union we've ever been a part of. And it has been an interesting process in that newsroom dynamics definitely changed with management and reporters. But we've won a lot of great concessions so far, and we'll see what that final contract looks like, and then we can all breathe easy for 3 years, which would be a relief.
Well, I think that's just where we're at. You see things like the Robert Eric's coming in, taking over the newspapers, selling off assets, selling real estate, downsizing the staff. Jeff, are you here? Anyway, I did Palm Beach Post, one of our board members, Jeff Ostrowski, when he was there 5 years ago, there were, 12 people or more on the business section staff, including the real estate people. And now it's down to, I think he said just a couple. That's happened everywhere. And I think, the organized labor thing, it may be time for that. It does seem like it's switching that way because the way that the man is pushing down on the people too much. And that's when the pushback comes down from here. Mary, what else do we need to say?
Well, that's a pretty hard topic to follow up on.
But we can change that.
Yeah, just to jump off from that, we veered off a little bit, the growth part of the Florida media market.
Any questions? Adam, Shirley, you have a question?
No, right now, good topics.
Any questions?
I know in Florida, you folks have Pointer Institute, right?
Yes.
Where does that fit into supporting journalism in the state and beyond
So-
these days?
I want to jump in here. Actually, there's the Pointer Folk Media and Journalism Fellowship. And since it launched, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, they have partnered up with newsroom. So they basically, it's a full ride, and you take classes every week. Our newsroom, our management is very good about allowing our journalists to continue their education to develop new skills. And so our managing editor, Rick Hirsch, has often pinpointed some reporters in the newsroom every single year to participate. So I was part of the cohort last year. We have 2 Miami Herald reporters this year. I believe they do get some funding. The actual newsroom does get some funding
They
from
pay
Pointer.
half your salary for the year.
They have
for
the
any
salary.
local reporter, and I believe it's for reporters of color.
Right, right.
So Pointer has stuff like that works really well, and people really appreciate it as a skill. Lots of interesting seminars and webinars and workshops for those reporters. But Pointer also owns the Tampa Bay Times. It is the major nonprofit news organization in Florida. It is struggling financially, as we all are. But so Pointer seems to be shrinking, but they still offer like a women's leadership seminar. They offer lots of the Pointer Cook Fellowship. They have lots of trainings that you can pay for that are really excellent. But they, other than that fellowship, they're not necessarily a philanthropic presence in the state of Florida. And that fellowship, the philanthropic side of it, comes from the Koch brothers Foundation.
So the fact that they own I still think of them as St. Petersburg, the Tampa Bay Times, how is that fitting into what you were talking about, Mary, with kind of the nonprofit model for the state? Is that just not doing the job?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question, and their business model is, they get so much of their revenue from selling these training. It's so training, and I just haven't seen it pivot into, from training to, we're offering the news. We're going to start our own. They really are separate. The Tampa Bay Times and Pointer. So they're 2 different entities, and I don't know what those discussions look like.
Okay, Eileen?
Ask you about net migration and how it's impacting the real estate market, and given climate change trends, why are so many people heading south?
Yeah,
Aldo?
the pattern to draw anyone to Florida have not changed, right? It's warm, there's no income tax, and there are fewer COVID restrictions that a lot of people appreciate. And Rebecca can talk about the influx of people from New York and California and Texas over the last year or two. But I will say that when it comes to thinking about why are people moving to a place that is potentially doomed in the future, it's a great question. And I think it's because a lot of people either are unaware or they can afford to. Like the reason that nobody on Star Island cares about climate change is because if their house blows away in a hurricane, they can afford to replace it or move somewhere else. The same is not to be said for a lot of people who are born here and cannot afford to move, who are being forced to move because of gentrification, whether that's driven by climate or just regular old-fashioned gentrification. A lot of people do move here for more opportunities from other states, though. It's a big, growing economy. I think the stat that everyone uses is 1,000 people a day. And maybe you can talk more about the specific patterns that you've heard in your interviews of what's driving people here.
Right, we are seeing a lot of people from New York, California, even the Midwest, Chicago, across the Northeast, including Boston, Massachusetts, Connecticut. And what's driving people here is the fact that we have a wave of new-to-market companies expanding here. Companies are expanding here because of the tax savings, right, after 2017 and the tax change, but also because with the pandemic, people realized, wait a minute, I don't need to spend so much money on an office space in New York. My team can work from anywhere. Why don't we work from South Florida? That's been the common theme. Now, when we're looking at the impact of the residential, on the residential market, prices are escalating. We actually saw a historic high this year in Miami-Dade County. For single-family homes, the median sales price, I think in June or July, was $515,000, according to the Miami Association of Realtors. And so that's all this wave of newcomers who are getting paid way more than the average person here, is bumping up the demand and also the pricing for real estate here in South Florida.
That's happening everywhere. It's really strong. And one thing that is happening here, I want you guys to come tonight. We're going to a place not far from here. What's it called? Linwood. Just a couple of miles. But what's happened there is it's amazing that this art, street art, and some quality art, graffiti, everything is transformed. This area is kind of it's kind of industrial, but it's coming into more commercial, restaurants, residential, everything. It's really turned this thing around. We're going there on a bus. We got 2 buses. We go to reception upstairs at the pool at 5 o'clock. It's over at 6 o'clock. And then hurry down to the buses, because we're going to try to get the wheels moved on the buses right after 6. We can be there by 6:10. Great, maybe we'll make the first bus. But it's going to be a great tour. We'll be down there, and you guys have to see this area. It's fantastic, and it's an excellent real estate story, no matter if you're covering commercial, residential, whatever. It's really impressive. So remember that one. And please tweet. And we use that hashtag. We got to get it going. We got to start, because we will. Sammy, you can run some numbers later, right? And you can see where we are on the trending thing for, see how high up we get. We usually get pretty good. So anyway, we have time for one more question. Eileen?
With the influx of new people into the state, what are you doing to reach millennial readers and get them to subscribe to your content?
So we, earlier this year, we started thinking about, well, why don't we provide a guide for millennial readers to share with them, okay, where can you buy under a certain price point, or if you're looking at being in a community with people of your own age, here's where you can find that sense of community. Something that we have found to be very successful is last year we did this because we started to see a lot of people moving in and buying in South Florida, starting, we started to see some migration in 2017, but we also started to see a lot of buyers last year, towards the end of the year. And so we partnered up with the Miami Association of Realtors to gain data from them and see, based on zip codes, where are people buying below the median sales price. And so that's attractive to the millennial who is looking to buy or is looking for a place to live and wants to find what are the most common or popular communities where we're seeing the most sales below the median sales price that I can afford. So that's something that we're doing, but it's all through content, how to reach them and how to think about what are their needs and how can we cater to them.
And of course, excuse me, Alex.
I was going to say, you're asking more broadly about how the rest of the Herald is sort of adapting to try to approach that millennial readership. We have really invested heavily in audience engagement in recent years. So that looks like, if you've ever looked at our Instagram 5 years ago, it's a completely different beast now. Many, many more followers, much more engaging, much more using, we use lives, polls, takeovers, shareable stories, and also we have a set system of call-outs. So maybe you're working on a story or you're trying to buy a home and having trouble, email us. And we have an organized system of call-outs where we reach out to people and bring them in. And another very successful technique that's worked really well is we've started this weekend for the first time doing tabling in public events. So we did one this weekend at a farmer's market in Miami, and we have a little QR code. You can click and you can follow our newsletters, you can sign up to subscribe, you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, and also we do an interactive community event called Curious 305 where we ask anyone, if any of you are from Miami, you can find this yourselves, what is the question you've always had about the community you live in? How do I get speed bumps in my neighborhood? Where did the Santa's Enchanted Forest jingle come from? Whatever your questions are, we sign a reporter, we answer that question, and we email them. Hey, we answered your question, here's the story. Sometimes you can bring the questioner, reader, audience member along with you for the recording, and that way it feels more like an involved community piece of journalism, and that's been really successful with millennial readers too.